Very quickly, a history of volunteer hospice. We were founded in 1978 by Rose Crumb, a nurse. We are literally a unicorn in the hospice world. We offer nursing care without billing Medicare or billing anybody for that matter. And we are local and independent. Next, the speaker series will be on March 12 with Jacob Vermeulen from Song Dance, and we will look at somatic approaches to grief using voice and movement. The details will be very soon on our website at volunteerhospice.org. Today, however, we are talking about shadow work. This is very important work, especially for those called to hold space for life's sacred threshold points like birth, death, or any deep transformative change or loss. During this presentation, you'll be guided to consider pathways that support you to acknowledge, reconcile with, and or integrate the pain, the hurt, the disappointment, the loss, envy, fear, failures, betrayals, and anger you may have known. It is essential to the work of holding space to be in dialogue with those aspects of self most often relegated to the subterranean levels of awareness, or the parts of ourselves that we don't want to see and look at. This examination of one's shadow is courageous work and can lead to a more integrated life, increasing our capacity to hold space for both birth and death. And those topics, for some of you who know me, are very, very close to my heart. Amy Wright Glenn earned a master's MA from Teachers College in Columbia University. She taught for 11 years in the Religion and Philosophy Department at the Lawrenceville School in New Jersey, earning the Dunbar Abston Junior Chair for Teaching Excellence. She is a Kripalu yoga teacher, a birth and death doula through Donna and Inelda training, a hospital chaplain, and a birthing mama, prenatal yoga and wellness instructor. She's done a lot of things. She's very accomplished. In 2015, she also founded the Institute for the Study of Birth, Breath, and Death, known for its innovative course design and teacher training programs. In addition to directing the Institute, she serves as co-director of middle school at the Odyssey School in Asheville, North Carolina. And they thankfully were able to survive this weather event that you had in September. She teaches yoga at the Riveter, volunteers with the Big Brother, Big Sister programs through United Way, and is active in her local Unitarian Universalist faith community. She's the author of two books, Birth, Breath, and Death, Meditation on Motherhood, Chaplaincy, and Life as a Doula, and the other book, Holding Space on Loving, Dying, and Letting Go. She recently contributed a chapter entitled Grief Work for Teachers, 3 Practices in Holding Space for Sorrow in 2023 anthology, Reframing Self-Care, published through the Center for Spiritual and Ethical Education. Her work has been featured in numerous online publications. Well, Amy, you've had, I guess, multiple lifetimes already. You have done so much. We are very, very pleased to have you here with us. And without any further ado, I'm going to let you take us through this amazing presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it. I'm going to spotlight myself so you can see me a little better. Hello, all. And I want to invite you at any point, if you have an idea you want to share or a question, to use the chat feature and just type it in, and I'll be able to pause when I see some chats and read them and be able to respond. Okay, does that sound good to you all? So you can just chat away with me. I'm actually in my classroom right now. I spent the day with my students. We've been doing a lot of writing, creative writing, and we spent the day at some cafes downtown in Asheville, North Carolina, and some local bookstores, and had the students dive into story. And I'd like to start with a story. I'd like to tell you a story about shadow work. And to prepare for receiving that story, I invite you to, if you're comfortable doing this, just to reach your arms up to the sky. You can put your pens down, you can put your phone down or whatever you might be holding down, and just breathe in. And then exhale, let the hands fly down like wings and drop the chin. Just feel yourself settle into your body, your back, the back of your head, the neck. Maybe wiggle your fingers, just shake out any tension. And we'll do that 2 more times. Okay, so on an inhale, open your eyes, arms reach up, 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 breathe in. You can even look up. And then when you're ready, exhale, let the arms float down, the chin drops to the chest. And feel this release. Shake the fingers, shake the head a little. And last time, breathing in, let the sunlight come in, breathe in, reach up, up, up. And then exhale, the arms come down, chin comes down, releasing. And then when you're ready, lifting that chin so it's parallel to the floor and perhaps bringing a hand to your heart or 2 hands to your heart. Take a breath in and take a breath out. Eyes open or closed. All right, thank you. So I want to start with a story, the shadow work story. And I teach a course called Shadow Work. It's an 8-hour course that's online. It's self-recorded. It's already recorded. So you can just pace yourself through it. And I'd be happy to send a code for all of you to be able to take that at a really good discount, those of you who are with me, if that interests you. And in that shadow work course, I tell the story of the shadow work my grandpa did with me years ago. So my dad's dad was a commanding officer in Italy for the Allies, for the US Army in World War II. So he was fighting in Italy against the Nazi army for 4 years. And he often would tell us a story called The Ugliest German I Ever Saw. That was the name of the story. And so all the family knew it. His 7 children knew it. His grandchildren knew it. I've heard my grandpa tell me this story. And the story goes like this. He and his unit were coming up on a German bunker, and it looked like it was empty. And they watched it for quite a while. They didn't see any activity. They didn't see any movement. So they thought, this bunker is empty. We should go explore. We should get in there. We should see what we can find. And so they threw a few grenades into it and watched again. No one came out. And my grandpa said that he was the first to go in. He told his men, I'm going to go in first. He was the leader. Like I wouldn't ask my men to do something I'm not willing to do. So he tells the story that he went into the German bunker and thinking it was empty. And he had his gun drawn and he went down the stairs, and it's like in the earth, right? These tunnels or dug out spaces. He described it, but it's hard to fully imagine. I wasn't there, but there were things on the wall, like you can shave, like maybe something for shaving, and it definitely looked like people had been there. He said it looked like it had been recently, full of people. And he turned a corner, and then he said he saw him. He said, I saw the ugliest German I have ever seen. He said his eyes were full of hate, and he was just staring at me with such fear and hate, and he had his gun drawn. And my grandpa said I was about to shoot until he realized it was a mirror, that there is a mirror in the bunker, and he was looking at himself. And he started to cry, and he said, I was the ugliest German I ever saw. Like that's what war had done to me. He said, Amy, I had become so afraid and so angry. And when I turned the corner and saw the man, it took him a moment to realize that man is me. And the reason he told this story was because he was trying to help me understand how the war changed him. My dad said he was pretty violent as a dad when he came back from the war and had a temper that he had not had before the war. And so that was his shadow work, was to kind of bring that man from the mirror home, that shadowed self needed to be integrated into his self, that it wasn't a German that was ugly somewhere else. It was a part of him. It was his own self. So I think we all could have stories like my grandpa's where we see something in ourselves that we don't like, and we see something in ourselves that we don't want to say is us, and yet it is us, or it's us in that moment, or it's a part of us in that moment. So shadow work is the willingness to excavate the self, to look in the mirror, to bring home the parts of ourselves that we hide, the secrets we don't want other people to know, the addictions we hide, the stories that only very few might know, or even for ourselves, they may even be family shadows, right? Like the shadow work of a generation connects to the shadow work of the next generation. My dad's temper to me comes from his dad's temper to him. He would say, I'm trying not to do what was done to me. I'm trying not to be so violent, and he would describe how he really worked with his temper. And so that was the shadow work. My shadow, my dad's anger towards me, connects to my grandpa in that trench. So when I think of shadow work, I think of the willingness to excavate the self. And I love the work of Pixie Lighthorse. She wrote a book called Gold Mining the Shadows. And she says, the shadow is all the parts of the self that we've been told by ourselves or our culture, our family, aren't lovable, aren't worthy, are disgusting, are bad, are dangerous. And her goal is to bring all those parts into, like, you think about a room with a circle of chairs, you bring them all into the room or around a table, you feed them good food, or you put them all in the same car. All the parts of self are welcome. But she says, don't put the shadow in the driver's seat. Don't put the shadow at the head of the table. Like, the shadow will come home to itself and the community of self, but it's not meant to run your life, right? You don't want, my grandpa wouldn't want that anger to be the focal point of his life, but it's a part of him. So I'll just pause there for a moment and let you consider that story, the ugliest German I ever saw. And I invite you to close your eyes for a moment, if that's comfortable, perhaps even bringing a hand to your heart, that heart-centered breathing that calms the vagus nerve and keeps us connected to our body. And just see where that story lands in you. Where does that story land in your body? What does it bring up in your mind? Can you relate? Or is it so different? And just feel the echo of the story of my grandpa. And now I invite you to go to the chat when you feel ready and perhaps share what came to you. Maybe a sentence or two, or, oh, that's happened to me. I've seen myself in the mirror once when I was angry and I didn't recognize myself. Or, maybe there's a way you really connect to the story, or there might be a way that it was very different and it didn't resonate. And that's fine either way. But if you can go into the chat and take a moment and let me know, how did that story land for you, right? Just take a moment and we'll read through some of this. So that's my first story, the story of my grandpa. And I will read the chats and just give you about 30 more seconds to share what that feels like to hear one of my family stories. I'll put the name of the book I mentioned for everyone to see. It's called Gold Mining the Shadows by a woman named Pixie Lighthorse. So we have a few thoughts that have come through. I'll read a few of them. And if you want to share in the chat, that's great. Please don't feel like you have to. But we have a statement and a question here. I can only do my own shadow work, but I so very much wish for my parents to do their own. Any tips for us to address generational shadow work that hasn't been done? You know, I think we can encourage, we could gift a class, we could gift a book, we could tell a story, but I think the best way I have found to encourage others to do shadow work is for me to do my own and to talk about it more openly. So my son, who's 13, he knows what shadow work means. You know, so when he feels his rage or his jealousy or his hurt, he can recognize it. It's a part of the self that's hungry to be integrated. You know, so when with your parents, maybe they'll be open, maybe they won't. I don't know. We can just offer our life as an example and be open talking about it. I think that's my first thought there, Greta. Another thought here, I know I have those parts I don't want to see or feel good about, and I welcome tools to help unearth them. Yeah, I feel the same. I mean, I've worked a lot with birth and death, and my sense, and I remember having this sense confirmed by the director of chaplaincy at the hospital where I trained to be a hospital chaplain. He said, if you don't deal with your own family's stories, you'll walk into the hospital room and you won't see someone else's grandma, you'll see your grandma. Like you carry your story with you. He said it's the living human document. You know, we each have a living human document, all that we carry in our body, in our way we move, the way we walk, the way we speak, the way, you know, it's all woven in us. And so being more aware and mindful of our own being helps us distinguish when, for me, when I walk into a hospital room and I'm with someone and they're dying, it helps me recognize where they begin and I end, or when I begin and they end. And I'm not fusing my story into theirs, but I'm hopefully opening my heart to theirs. And if they have a lot of shadow, and the more I've done my own shadow work, the less it will scare me. Right? So I remember helping a woman through a really scary surgery where she had a very large tumor, like about a 30-pound tumor in her abdomen, and she was going to have it taken out. And she wasn't sure she wanted to because it kind of created this barrier, and she had survived a lot of sexual abuse. And so she had become very large. She had this very big tumor. And she had long conversations with me about how that tumor was like a protection for her and her weight was a protection for her. And if I had a lot of shadow around weight or sexual abuse or fear around being protected, I think her story could have triggered me a lot. And so I was aware, I was holding space for her shadow, that I could do it pretty well, I think, because I didn't carry a lot of my own shadow into it. But if I was in a different kind of room with a different story that was like mine that I hadn't worked on much, it is more likely that my heart would start beating, or I might get anxious, or I might want to make it a short visit, right? So how do we unearth those parts of ourselves that we may not want to see or feel good about? A big piece of that for me is mindfulness, meditation, therapy, journaling, good friendships. I mean, so much of self-care, I think, unearths. And if we want more specific tools, I'm happy to reflect. Let's see, one person wrote, I landed in my lower belly. You know, the story of my grandpa, it just landed in the body, in the belly. Or the belly can be a source of great wisdom, intuition, gut instinct, and also a place where we can carry, as you write, past illness and trauma in the body. So you notice the story landed there. And I'm going to read a few more, and then I have a second story. I have seen the ugly side of myself, and it was terrifying. I had no idea it was a part of me. And now that I do, I'd like to invite it from hiding so it doesn't surprise and scare me again. Yeah. Well, the next story connects just to that. So just hold that gentle intuition tenderly. Yeah, I'm feeling my grandfather's horror at recognizing himself, that you feel honored to hear this story. And nowadays, when I look in the mirror, I surprise myself as I look so much older than I look in my mind's eye. My Aunt Chris often says that. She says she walks by a mirror and she'll pause and go, who is that old lady? She just turned 80. And she still has that 30-year-old energy in her. And she'd be like, wait, who's that woman? You know, it was sweet. So let me share my screen now, because the next story is a poem. And I'd like to read it to you. And I'd like you to be able to see it. So it's a poem by one of my favorite authors, Thich Nhat Hanh. I think some of you might know his work. He's a Buddhist poet. He's no longer alive in his body, but he lived a long life into his 80s, wrote a lot of poetry, originally from Vietnam. And one of my favorite poems that he wrote is called Call Me by My True Names. And when I first heard this poem, I cried, and I wasn't sure if I liked it a lot because it was hard. And I thought, how can this gentle, good man write this poem? So I will share it with you because that was my first impression. Now that I've read it many times, it's grown on me. I think it's shadow work. This poem is about shadow work. So let's read it together. Look deeply. I arrive in every second. To be a bud on a spring branch. To be a tiny bird with wings still fragile, learning how to sing in my new nest. To be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower. To be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, in order to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that are alive. I am the frog swimming happily in the clear pond. And I am also the grass snake who, approaching in silence, feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones. My legs as thin as bamboo sticks. And I am the arms merchant, selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom in all walks of life. My pain is like a river of tears, so full it fills the 4 oceans. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and laughs at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names, so I can wake up, and so the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion. I just invite you to go into your heart like we did before and bring a hand to your heart where you leave the door open, that door of compassion. And you can have your eyes open or closed. Let that poem settle around you, in you, through you. Notice your response. Notice how it lands in you. Please call me by my true names. And he explains why. He says, so my heart can be open. Take a moment more, take a deep breath in and out. When you're ready, if you did close your eyes, you could open them. And just take a moment to go into the chat and share what you noticed, either in your body or in your heart. Just share what you noticed. From Thich Nhat Hanh, call me by my true names. And I'll give you about 30 more seconds here to take the time to just write, just to write a response. And I think for me, when I read your words, just know that I'm doing my best to lift them up as you share them. Okay. So let's see what we have here. The Threshold Choir has put the last verse of his poem to music. Oh, goodness, I would love to hear that. If you are able to email that to me or share that, it would be profound because it's a poem that stayed with me for a long time. Even the ugliest parts of ourselves make us who we are today. And there's a purpose in his poem, which isn't, I just want to see all of life and call it mine. But it's, I want to see all of life, call it mine, because it will help open my heart to compassion, right? That's the reason to do shadow work. There's a reason. It's not just to integrate, it's to integrate so we are more compassionate. For me, that's a key part of the poem. And the light can get in through the cracks. The words of this poem tie joy and sorrow so tightly together. That my inner feeling is tight emotion verging on tears of the same. Yeah. Gratitude to know that I am it all, with intention to bring balance and love to my soul. And then a statement here, I am trying to understand myself and this world of hard edges and beauty. I am 75 years old. I struggle so much with the distance between us when I know we are one. Fear leading the way. Yeah, I think fear is often a part of. And then we'll just open it up and hear your thoughts, okay? So again, it connects to a picture. And let me share again here. This is a picture of a woman who was forced to really do shadow work. I mean, in some sense, we can avoid it. But every time she looks in the mirror, now she does her shadow work. I guess she could still avoid it, but she can't avoid her face now. And it's a powerful story. Her name is Amina Bahrami. It happened years ago. And she's holding her pictures of herself. These are pictures of herself when she was, before her attack on her face. So she was a college student in Tehran, Iran. And she was being stalked by a man who was in college too, who's one of her classes, who would approach her and ask her to go on a date, who had a lot of interest in her, who would follow her around campus. And she felt really disinterested in him. She's like, I don't want to go on a date with you. He even proposed marriage. And she's like, I don't know you. I don't want to be married to you. I don't want to go on a date with you. And he wasn't mentally stable. He was definitely not a safe person. And one day he approached her, and he had been approached her quite a few times. And he opened up a container and threw a liquid on her. And it was acid. And it blinded her. And she's had many surgeries on her face. So that's what she looks like after many surgeries. And I've listened to her story, and I've read about her story. And what I found very powerful in her story is that the man was apprehended and taken to prison. And in Iranian law, she could have asked for the same thing to be done to him. They would have put acid on his face. It's kind of like an eye for an eye, because it was such a horrific crime. And the authorities gave her the option. Like you can actually be in the room. You could come and see when this happens to him. Like we would put acid on his face and do what he did to you. So she said, yes, I want that to happen. And she went into the room and he begged her, please don't do this. Please don't do this. And she, in an interview, she said, I didn't not do it because of his begging, but she said, I just didn't want to see it done again. She said, I never want to hear from you. I don't want to have anything to do with you. I don't forgive you, but I'm not going to have this done to you. And she didn't. And she didn't do the eye for an eye thing. She stopped it. He still served prison time, and she still lives with the result of his attack. She moved to France for part of her life. She's written about it. And I think through writing, through coming so close to the moment where she could have watched another human being have his face burned with acid and choosing not to, even if it was just for her own trauma, like she didn't want to hear it again or smell it again or see it again. It was such a powerful story of shadow work. And I don't know what I would have done or how any of us might have acted in those moments unless it's us, right? And she was a young girl, like maybe 20. So her story is still unfolding. She's still alive. You could look it up. It's one story, one example of a crime and a response to a crime. But a lot of shadow work has to do with crime and how we navigate hatred or harm or abuse, whether sexual, verbal, physical, in her case, a physical abuse on her face. And what do we do with that energy, right? That gets triggered, that natural energy of I want revenge, or I want to hurt you back, or I want to punish you. Like, what have you done, right? The sense of justice. And I don't think shadow work means there's not justice, but I think it means, like Thich Nhat Hanh said, the heart is open to compassion. And her story is a powerful one for me. And I want to share it with you because it's still a story with a lot of question marks for me. You know, unlike the story of my grandpa, when he walked into an empty bunker and saw a mirror, you know, he didn't have to face a real German in that situation. He didn't have to actually kill someone in that moment or be killed. It was himself. She had to face a real person who had harmed her and had to face herself in that moment. Would she harm him back? Right. So I share it. It's a powerful story. It's a very powerful picture. And I'm just going to ask us to do the same thing we did with the other two stories. Just to close your eyes and put your hand on your heart. And consider Amina Bahrami. Maybe leave your eyes open if that's more comfortable, but hand to heart. Again, notice your body, notice your breath. Notice where that story lands. And take a few breaths just to be with your body here, be with your heart, be with your thoughts. And taking one more inhale and exhale. And if you did close your eyes, go ahead and open them. And you can go into the chat and share some thoughts. I'll remove the spotlight so I can see your beautiful faces here. Just feel free if you have a response to that story, the third story of shadow work. If you don't have a response, you want to share, that's fine. But if you do, feel free to to bring it forward in the chat. It could be about 30 more seconds. So it can be one word, it can be a phrase, it could be a question, it could be what you felt in your body. There's no way wrong to do this, just to open it up for words. And I see some thoughts coming through. So I see the word forgiveness, the word compassion. The woman's choice illustrates how we can only act upon ourselves and change ourselves, not anyone else. And then wanting to read her story. An eye for an eye feels primitive, unenlightened, but it may be the first line of defense, but can be passed by for greater good. She didn't cause him pain, but she also said she did not forgive him. I believe he needs to forgive himself. She will benefit from laying down her pain. She knows we're all connected and suffer with the suffering of others. I feel heavy grief and compassion for her in my body, but I know it stored up grief for harms I have experienced. This would impact being able to be neutral when listening to someone else's suffering. Her life became dealing with her injury. Yeah, it did. So many surgeries. So thank you for sharing this. And one more thought here, ultimate forgiveness, the word within that is give, like forgive. And then one more thought here, interesting that she had a perpetrator to point to. I feel alone in my conflict, not knowing exactly where the shadows come from. Somehow shadow work is the perfect title for my issues. My shadows are elusive, and I find my frustration in not knowing how to process. Well, I can give you another book thought on this because let me put it to everyone. It's one of my favorite books. The title isn't going to connect to shadow work, but I think it does. It's called The Happiness Hypothesis. I'll put it in the chat. The Happiness Hypothesis by Dr. Jonathan Haidt. And he describes the brain and how the human brain is wired, he thinks, with a negativity bias. That if we just look at the back brain, the low brain, what we call the primitive brain or the reptilian brain, that it's wired to respond more powerfully to what it perceives as threat than it perceives pleasure. Because if a fish is in the ocean and it misses a predator, it dies. But if it misses some prey, it's okay. It'll find more prey tomorrow, right? So our brains, he argues, are wired to respond more powerfully in our nervous system, in our body, to the negative. It stands out more. Like we have what he calls an inherent negativity bias. And some people it's more than others, but he feels it's just part of the human brain. So maybe we all just have shadows from the primitive, interesting reptilian brain that we all have in the back of our head. That would be Jonathan Haidt's, I think, response to that. I love that book. So I have talked a lot and we have a few minutes. I'm happy to take about 5 more minutes. If there's any questions or ideas that you want me to hear from you, I would just invite you to unmute your mic and you can share. Or if you have any thoughts you wanted to say to me before we say goodbye of the 3 stories I shared with you. I see a thank you and a thank you. Thank you. Thank you to you all. Thank you for your time. I hope it's helpful. I hope it's helpful. I will send an email about to Astrid with the information on how to access shadow work, the course, and I'll be happy to give a good discount if that interests you all. But most importantly, just know that every moment you have the opportunity to approach the parts of ourselves that we might not love with compassion. So I appreciate this time with you all. And if you have any other comments, maybe you can just email. Let me put my email in the chat. You see some kind words here. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, and I will email you back, Amy, whatever comment I receive afterwards. Yeah, and also your contact information and all that, of course. Yeah, this was very, very rich. You know, very short but very rich, and so I think we did good. Thank you.
It was wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
it
wonderful
was
to be
very
here.
good.
Thank you so much. I loved it.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. And I know you got to run, so we'll let you go. I'm going to stay on. If anyone wants to continue the discussion or address any questions, concerns, you know, we'll continue filling up the chat so Amy can see later on what, you know, how
Okay.
we kept talking.
I love it. I'm so grateful for the work you do in this world, each one of you. Thank you for that.
I'm grateful for what you do and for just being here in this world. Thank you, Amy. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, I'll say goodbye.
Take care.
Lots of love.
Bye. Bye.
Goodbye.
All right. Well, feel free to unmute yourself if you want to share or share in the chat. If you have questions, concerns, comments. I was one of the things that just came to my mind as she was talking about the book by Jonathan Haidt, I don't know how to say his name, the book on happiness, the happiness hypothesis, is that our brain is really wired for survival, which is why I think we, you know, go towards the, you know, we to a more negative bias because we need to survive no matter what. And we're still, you know, wired for that. But I'm open to, you know, a discussion on this or anything else. The names of Amy's books again. Yeah, I'll put them in the chat. They're very long names books and I'm a slow typer. So why don't somebody start talking while I do that?
I'm Cindy Eaton. I came in late, unfortunately, but I was wondering, does anybody know where Amy, if she does the course in person, where there would be like a group, and where her base is?
Okay, I know Amy is based in Asheville, North Carolina.
Ah, okay.
I do not know if her course is online only or hybrid or in person.
Okay.
So find that out.
I'll look into that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. And I'm sorry you came in late, but I'm glad that you were able to join us anyway.
Yeah. Unavoidable circumstances, unfortunately. Okay.
That seems to be the name of the game this year.
Yes. No, it's nuts. Okay.
Okay. Okay, so the names of the two books by Amy are up there now. Oh, Pam has a wonderful question. Thank you, Pam. Where is my compassion for myself? Yeah. Yeah. Don't we all need that, you know, self-reflective inner work back to ourselves, compassion for ourselves, self-forgiveness, you know, forgive ourselves that, yes, we have shadows, you know, that aspects of us come out that we are not keen on having others see, or we didn't even know they existed until they pop out and we're like, oh my God, I am this ugly person. Who has not experienced that at least once?
But I would say it's,
Oh,
yeah, it's on. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
I would say when you said survival, that was the perfect thing. It's a survival technique. I I'm realizing that, and it helps to not blame yourself that way. We're trying somehow to balance our lives, and for me, it's been a huge challenge.
Yeah, and our lives are complicated. Yeah.
It feels like survival. It really does.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
I find that that self-critical voice is sometimes the voice of childhood friends, siblings, of your parents,
Mhm.
where even when those people aren't present, we tend to criticize ourselves in the same way that we would when they were there.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I've worked through is, would I criticize another child doing those things now that I'm an adult, looking back? And I wouldn't in most cases. And so I'm using that as a springboard to stop that inner criticism,
Yeah.
you know.
Good advice. Is very well said. Mhm.
Mm.
And you know, in the work we do here at Volunteer Hospice, we do see patients and bereaved feel really bad about themselves because they feel like they should be. Patients sometimes they feel like they should be strong. Bereaved people feel like they shouldn't be crying anymore. They should get better. You know, it's like there is all this should that come up. Those you know, nasty little words like should.
Mhm.
And yet it really starts with oneself. You know, it's really being aware that you think that way. Oh, I should be stronger. But if you're not even aware that you think that way, you can't even start addressing the issue. So first you have to bring awareness, and maybe, and I'm bringing this back to hospice work and bereavement work, maybe the work of that we do is to act as a mirror to the people we interact with, so they can see by us rephrasing what they're telling us when they tell us, oh, I should be strong. Really? And what makes you say that? And kind of opened, you know, the inquiries for themselves. Not, we don't have to come up, and we cannot come up with any solution. You know, we can't change anybody. We know that, right? We meet people late in life and we cannot change anyone. But we can perhaps just open the door just a little bit so that a bit of self-inquiry starts, and just be curious for ourselves about why they think that way. And maybe that opens the door to self-forgiveness. Maybe.
Well said.
And John, you have an interesting comment here. Forgive ourselves, but shouldn't we also forgive others? The acid gal said she couldn't. So yeah, how can we forgive others if we can't really forgive ourselves? If we cannot do for ourselves something, are we really, really forgiving others? Or is that like a bypass? You know, it seems to me like a little bit of a what we call a spiritual bypass. Like, oh, I don't have to do the work for myself, but you know, I will forgive others. True forgiveness is probably very, very hard to obtain, I think. You know, it's something that we probably work on. Yes, Trevor.
Someone wrote that forgiveness was more for the person who forgives than the one who is forgiven.
Forgiveness is more for the person who forgives than for the forgiven. Yeah. Yes.
Stops hate.
Makes us feel good.
Stops hate.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe that's why we need to start with ourselves. You know, the stories that Amy brought were really interesting because in the first one, there is one person really who realizes how much he has changed during the course of this war and what he's become. And this realizing that helps him understand that he doesn't have to be this ugly person. But in the story that she brought about the woman who was attacked with acid, there is a perpetrator. And it's, to me, it's a very, very different angle. What is the shadow for that woman? You know, what is her shadow? Is it seeing herself disfigured in the mirror that she lives with every day, that she has to make peace with every day? Or is it the man who attacked her? I don't know.
When I first saw her face, I thought, oh, it's kind of ugly. But after I heard the story, the ugliness to her face went away and I could look at her without that thought. I don't know if anyone else had that.
We had a person in our school when we were growing up that had a face similarly disfigured, and she went through our school system, and it was challenging for her.
It's from a burn.
Yeah, it was a burn, and I just, I think like most of us, we don't approach them. And she was older than I was, so it would have been kind of strange to approach her, but I don't know how to express what I'm feeling about it. It's so complicated and painful. I wish I would have gotten to know her. I'm sure she was an amazing person.
Laurel, would you think she more disliked people looking at her or avoiding looking at her?
Yeah. I'm trying to fathom the whole experience. It's so overwhelming. As a, growing up a girl, and my family had the store in town, and we all had to look just right, and looks was everything to my family, how we all looked. And so I'm really conscious, uncomfortably so, about myself. And I wonder in some ways if maybe she has it easier than I do. I don't know. I really don't, because I can't fathom. I really cannot understand. Well, and every person will be different who's gone through an experience of that kind of trauma. And some of people's trauma doesn't show up on their face. And that's the other side of us that are dealing with trauma.
Yeah, in a way, I mean, I don't think it's what the experiences that we go through will end up looking like different scars on different people. You know, it's not what happens to us that is really the essence of our life. It's how we dealt with what happened to us.
Yeah.
How we, you take two similar traumas with two seemingly similar people, and they will have completely different reactions.
Yeah.
And so it's how we process our experiences that makes us what we are.
Shadow work.
Yeah, on oneself. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Amy's first story really touched me deeply.
Mhm.
And there was a time when I was a lot younger that I was looking at wedding photographs of a friend's daughter's wedding, and there were pictures of all the guests. And I came across this one, and I kept thinking, I did not see that person at the wedding. Who is that person? And I finally had to ask, And it turned out it was me. And I couldn't recognize me looking at, and I don't know where this fits in with shadow work, but the fact that I couldn't recognize me, and it was a good picture of me, I felt like it was the opposite of what Amy's grandfather experienced, that I got to see perhaps who I really appear in the world. But I feel like it's perhaps my shadow was so overshadowing me, I couldn't see myself at that time. I don't know.
Yeah, that must have been a very weird experience.
It still is.
Mm-hmm. 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 Hmm.
Did you have childhood trauma?
Not particularly, you know. I was shy, but no horrible things happened that I remember. Just, you know, the normal psychology of a kid.
I mean, it's, you know, I have no idea. It sounds like, you know, my first impression is like you may have changed so much between the time of this wedding and when maybe you were looking at the photographs, that, you know, there was that part of you at the time was no longer a part of you when you looked at the photograph.
Maybe, yeah.
You know, was it a shadow or was it who you were at the time? I mean, some of us may have gone through several transformations through our lives, you know.
Definitely.
Yeah. So maybe that's what it is, you know.
Well, maybe the shadow was like more of a self, an image of yourself. And when you saw the picture, it looked better than your image of yourself inside.
I think that's where I was. Yes. Yeah.
Maybe we're all beautiful and we just don't know it.
We're not taught that we're beautiful necessarily. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we should be. We
Mhm.
should be taught that we're beautiful.
Yeah.
Speak for yourself. You should see my mirror.
I think I can see it pretty well there, but okay.
You're looking good.
Yeah, in this world, we put such an emphasis on looks. Like you said, Laurel, you know, I mean, you grew up, you know, at a time and a place where looks were important. And, you know, look at us. I mean, you know, we pay attention to our looks, you know, we got to look a certain way, you know, we feel like that's important, you know. And I think it's interesting that as we age and we have gray hairs and, you know, wrinkles, people look at us differently. And then, you know, one day we'll be maybe in a hospital bed and people will look at us differently again.
Yeah,
You know?
definitely.
So what is this looks that we are so attached?
We're taught that since day one. Every advertisement that comes by, and it's constant.
Well, turn off the TV.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Even when, I mean, as soon as we're born,
Mhm.
oh, isn't that a beautiful baby?
Yep. Yeah. And
It comes out immediately.
yeah, I'm going to say something almost rude here. Really, is a baby just born, all wrinkled up, coming out of this birth canal that's been having been in trauma for hours? So that's people.
You know, I'm a retired labor and delivery nurse, and everybody says how beautiful the baby is, except occasionally there'll be the realistic grandmother that will say, she'll look better in a few days.
Yeah.
Ah,
But it is true. The mothers are looking at those babies through cheesecloth lenses, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
and they're perfect.
yeah. I mean,
And we see them as perfect. And I'm sure in their little vacant mind, we don't know how vacant, they're thinking they're perfect. They're
mhm, yeah,
so that is what we want to try to reclaim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it is perfect. It might not be beautiful, but it's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Get rid of that concept of people's value being connected to their appearance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I'm getting older and older, no matter every morning I look in the mirror and I see new things happening to my face that I never planned on.
Yeah. Don't we all?
So I've got to get rid of that idea of what is good.
Yeah.
It is funny how our self-image changes through our life. Like there was a story about this person who was a teacher going into a kindergarten class, and she asked the class, like, is anybody here an artist? And all the children raised their hands up. But she went into the middle school class, and by 7th, 8th grade, nobody would raise their hand. You know? So what happens in our socializing that
Competition.
changes our image of who we are?
Mm. Well, and the concept of the person who is dealing with severe illness and the ravages that that can have on their appearance and how they're feeling about their own body image and self self-esteem related to that.
Right.
Yeah.
That means that at a woman who is 85 years old and dealing with the ravages of cancer, they're still going to want to have someone help put their makeup on.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, not all
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
My significant other's mother just passed away at 84, and she had to have her makeup on every day,
Oh.
you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And who are we to judge? You know?
Hmm. Right.
Yeah. Put her makeup on. She feels happy.
Yeah,
Fine.
exactly.
Yeah.
Astrid, with that thought, why did you bring this wonderful session to us in one of these
In the speaker series?
speaker series? Yeah,
Because
loved
I
it.
think because I heard about Amy through a podcast person, Tracy Ariely. She does a podcast, which title name I can't remember right now. And I'm interested in birth and death. And when Amy said she was wanting to do something about shadow work, I thought it would be sort of informative for us as we sit with patients at the bedside or as we sit with people who are bereaved or as we face our own mortality. You know, what is it that might help us integrate our life a little bit better so that we face our own death or the death of others in a more holistic way, you know. That's why I thought that would be interesting. So you tell me if it was interesting or not.
Interesting.
yeah.
I'm so
Very.
happy about it.
Yeah, thank you.
So put light on the shadow.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Well,
yeah. I
in
mean,
order to help others, we have to be somewhat contained ourselves. I mean,
yes,
to be a good caregiver, you kind of have to have yourself out of the way, and
yeah,
shadows get in the way.
Mhm.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah. So, you know, that's all that. And I'm always, you know, curious and interested into who come to this series. You know, there are a fair amount of people connected with hospice as volunteers, and there are a fair amount of people connected with hospice because they have because their loved one went through hospice. And then there are some of us here that, who come because we are curious about what it's about. And so I'm always fascinated by, who can come here and who has a certain amount of interest and curiosity. And I really appreciate that people, want to share their stories and their experience, with us.
We're glad you're there.
Thank you. Thank you. Our group has dwindled, over time. And I mean, this timing was different due to Amy's schedule. So we started not at noon as we usually do at 12:30, and it seemed to work for everybody. And I appreciate that. But I also know that, some people had to leave at 1:30. And I mean, I'm happy to stay on until the conversation dwindled, but, I don't want anyone to feel like, oh, they need to stay on. So please speak up. There are a few people here who are muted, who've been listening. I'm happy for that too. But if there is anything you'd like to share, feel free.
I just want to say thank you for putting on this session. I have a dog in my lap at the moment. I'm actually in Victoria, BC, and I think I found out about you through K-Squim, the radio station. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it's really
Yeah.
great to offer these sessions for your community, because I've been trying to get involved in volunteer hospice, and we are so overflowing with volunteers that I am not needed. So I've been trying to find other opportunities. But yeah, this kind of session is really, really wonderful. And this one in particular I found is really great, because I know I brought things to my mother-in-law's recent passing, and just trying to be as neutral as I could with her was challenging at some points and easy at other points, and observing other people with her and how they were bringing all of their stuff to, the space where, she's passing away, and they're doing their shadow work right there.
Yeah.
So
And you raise a very interesting point, Rebecca. It's very hard to have two roles, to be the daughter and the caregiver. It's very, very difficult, and so, I appreciate that you can share that with us, and,
Well,
share.
it was easier at 57 than it was with my own mother when I was 25.
Oh, yeah.
How much we change and learn.
Yeah, we do change.
Well, it looks like you're still loving up somebody there. That's good.
Yes.
Yeah,
She's
Yeah,
happy.
they're
Oh,
it's adorable. Yeah. And there is we had brought in 2022 or 23 Sarah Kerr. She's a doula who lives in British Columbia.
Okay.
The recording of that session is on our website, so you can look it up. All the recordings of all the speaker series are on the website.
I noticed that, so I've only just discovered you in the last couple of weeks, so I'm going to start watching those. Yes.
Okay, great. Good. Excellent. Well, I want to thank you for, staying on for a bit longer and having a
just froze.
well.
lively conversation.
Here you are.
How do you go?
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. I learned something with each speaker you put on for us. Thank you so much. This is Mary Lou in New Jersey.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Thank you. And thank you, Penelope and Adam. I see you're here on the phone. Thanks for being there. Hey, Pauline, thank you. Showing your face. Okay, well, I will stop the meeting. Bye-bye, everyone.